has here lately. I guess we haven't really had controversial development this year. It's never anybody here.
That's crazy.
Gosh, even that's hard to.
This is.
I mean, the colors are vibrant, but it's like we look at it all day, and it's like a struggle to figure out what that matters.
Well, look at the difference between here and there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple shades there that you can't even decipher.
Good evening, everyone. We're almost on time, but we'll call the committee of the whole meeting for October 10th to order. Please call the roll.
Grab it if they ask for it.
Alderman Strelchek is absent. Alderman Tulaco? Alderman Meyer?
Here.
Alderman Hancher?
Here.
Alderman Bach?
Here.
Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Schneider?
Here.
Alderman Gebhardt?
Here.
And Mayor Nurbin?
Here. First up, we have two sets of meeting minutes, one from August 29th and one from September 12th.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, questions, etc.? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved. Next, we have a couple of discussion items. First is the Port Washington Road corridor updates. So I think Kim and Jack are going to walk us through what's been going on over the past few months.
Sure, we're just here to get you update you on things that's been going on with the Economic Development Board and get some feedback from you so we can keep working on these initiatives. A couple things that we're going to discuss. One is the zoning out there. One of the things that Economic Development Board was tasked with was looking at the zoning in the corridor and looking at making changes to some of the zoning districts out there. The city hasn't updated its zoning code from the 90s in this area, and so a lot of our districts in this area, it's hard to see on the screen. I did put paper copies in front of you as well of these two options because it kind of gets whitewashed out there. But before I get into that, I'll just kind of show you this is our zoning map, which is probably also not the easiest thing to see. Out in this area, you can see the rainbow of colors. This is basically Port and Mequon here. You have all different shades of pinks and there's some greens. We have all different zoning districts out there from B1, B2, B3, B4. We have residential, we have multifamily, we have institutional. There's just a whole hodgepodge of uses along that corridor. So what staff tried to do was try to consolidate and cluster uses based on existing patterns out in the area. And one things we looked into doing was trying to just kind of group things in large pockets at this point. And so what we came up with, and it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but you can see the different colors. So we have large scale office, which is the blue area mostly in this area here. So this is kind of where Corporate Parkway is, where you have the Pick and Save, the movie theater, Elite, some of the bigger size buildings. And then we also have the shopping center district, which is like the pavilions and over by the old Pick and Save site. And then other areas over here, this is kind of the purplish color, that's like a office and service area, and then the darker red is a retail and service area. And then we incorporated some overlay zones, which we don't currently have in our code right now, and we actually put them at the nodes at this point, right on Dundas Bay and at Mequon Road. And those nodes we would anticipate would be used for some of the less desirable uses that we see that have a high traffic generation, like gas stations and fast food restaurants. So we submitted this we brought this into the attention of Economic Development Board because one of the issues we noticed is that if we were going to cluster these uses, we were going to end up with some non-conforming uses. And this kind of shows this wouldn't be 100%, but this is pretty close. These are some of the uses we found that would be non-conforming if we went with this model, basically. So you would have a number of the fast food restaurants. You'd have like basically the old Taco Bell, which is now going to be a Dunkin', and you would have the Cousins. You'd have the new Arby's even, and then the new Gilley's Car Wash, Shell gas station, the storage facility, and the two hotels over here, and then there's also a detailing place. So we brought this in front of Economic Development Board and basically said, we can go down this path, but sometimes it's uncomfortable for a community to create a non-conforming use, especially if it's a long-time business in the community. So what they came up with was basically an option 2, which basically changes the overlay zone, which incorporates more of the area here, and it actually shifts the overlay zone from this location here down to over here. So this option would reduce the amount of non-conforming uses in the area. You can see it dramatically drop, so we lost all the fast food ones. The hotels, we actually added the gas station and the Goodyear to the corner because those would no longer be within that overlay zone. So this is the best we could do. We could work on an option where there wouldn't be any non-conforming uses, but then we're just going to be watering down the zoning to a point where it almost matches what we have right now. So that's one of the things we kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about is what's your appetite in terms of creating these non-conforming uses along the corridor. The next thing we discussed a little bit was what's the viability long-term of office and retail in this corridor. We've seen a softening in the office market with people working from home. Retail has been hit by online shopping. So we talked about, well, what other options do we have? We talked a little bit about industrial. They felt industrial wasn't really a suitable land use in this area. The only industrial we have in this area is I think there's one little pocket over in the B4 that currently has industrial, but the rest of the stuff doesn't have any industrial use in it. And then we talked a little bit about multifamily, whether we want to see additional multifamily. And, you know, there's apple orchards out there, there's Greenbrier, there's Winding Hollow. There's a number of existing multifamily uses along the corridor which don't seem to be that objectionable to people currently, so we kind of posed the question, would we want to see more? They were against adding any industrial to the area, but they were not totally opposed to looking at multifamily. I think they were, when they thought of multifamily, they were thinking of what we did in town center, and I think they didn't want to see 3 or 4 story stacked apartments, but they didn't seem to be opposed to having 2 or 4 family units or condominiums in the area. So that kind of delved into this issue of, should we look at this from a long-term perspective and look at doing a market analysis? We haven't done a market analysis for the city probably since the 90s. And so should we get a professional in here to come and look and tell us what the long-term trends are and how it's going to impact this corridor before we go any further with this determining the different types of zoning in this area? And so that I think the economic development was fully supportive of. And we do have funds available left in our consultant dollars, and then the rest of it could be paid for out of the TIF. So there will be funding available for it, and that's another question we want to see how the council feels about whether we want to go down that path to do a market analysis. The other thing we talked about a little bit is, and this was also dovetails into the market analysis, is there's the idea of a hotel. I know there's been talk by some of the economic development board members as well as some council members about should we look for the viability of another hotel on the corridor. And so that's another thing that the market analysis can address. We also talked about that from a zoning perspective. Right now, hotels are in our B2 zoning district, which is our commercial zoning district, which probably wouldn't necessarily be a good area. Even with the proposed clustering of the zoning, I don't know if there's a good district for that at this point, and I don't know if we'd want to give that away. So one of the things we talked about would be to add hotels to the land use plan element and dictate certain areas that would be acceptable for a hotel and put it in the land use plan. That way, if somebody does come forward, they'll still have to do a zoning approval, so we don't basically just give away the store in a sense that they still have to come through and get all the approvals, and we can put conditions on if we want. So I guess at this point, I'll just stop, and this is from the zoning perspective. Well, this is some of the questions we need to answer. How does the council feel about uses along this corridor, multifamily, industrial? Or is there support for doing a market analysis? Are you okay with the level of non-conforming uses that we're creating by doing these zoning districts? I will say that our code, unlike a lot of other places, does protect non-conforming uses a little bit. You can actually expand a non-conforming use under our code. The biggest issue with the non-conforming use that our code doesn't really address is if it ends up sitting vacant for over a year, then they would not be able to keep that use. But I don't necessarily see that as a big issue, but again, I think when you have existing businesses that have been there a long time, I think they feel somewhat slighted if you tell them that now your use is no longer conforming to the zoning they're in. So I guess we're looking for feedback on that before we go any further with the zoning, just to see what the appetite is. If we want to go down the path of not really trying to create non-conforming uses, we're going to be in this issue that it's going to be pretty watered down. So that's kind of the trade-off of the two. So either we're going to have to stick with our guns in terms of creating pockets of uses that are similar, or we're going to have to kind of let things open a little bit more. So, and the other thing I think that came up with Economic Development Board, but I don't think we can really address, is the number of banks and financial institutions along the corridor. They are so spread out in so many different areas. I don't think we could come up with a way to kind of regulate them any more than what we do already. I think it's just, that's a market issue, and I don't know if we can really do much about that. So at this point, I guess I'll turn it over to the mayor and the council if you have any questions or comments about what we're doing and where we're going, if we're on the right track, wrong track.
So I'll provide a little more context from the Economic Development Board meeting. A couple of things were kind of driving the conversation. One is, like Jack mentioned, how soft the market for office has been and is continuing to get. That was the impetus for talking about getting a consultant in to look at market trends and what are your options within there. Are you know, we're already sort of facing some of the office buildings getting a little more long in the tooth. They're not getting maintained as well because rents are suppressed. So there's not enough revenue to reinvest in making the buildings look better. The thought was get a consultant in and see what we could do with that. What's there a market for? What could we maybe do differently with not all of that area, but some of it, to get in front of that a little bit. You see a lot of people in the news reacting to it now, and the thing they tend to go to, like at Bayshore, is that all of a sudden you've got a giant place where a Sears used to be, and there's a 4-story apartment building, which is not what we're desiring to do. So when Jack says multifamily, we're thinking more lower end, lower density, more in line with what's there today. I think the Apple Orchard's got a bunch of fourplexes. It's not nearly as densely populated as Town Center. We wouldn't ever seek to redo something on that scale on the east side. But that's one option. I mean, industrial is another option, but it's not great everywhere. Maybe at the extreme north end of that corridor, but it's hard to put an industrial building in the south end of the corridor where there's existing offices. A, there's not enough room for some of the parcels, and B, it would just look very out of place. So that captures a little bit of that discussion. And then the other one was the hotel. Is there room maybe to take one of those sites where there's office now, perhaps, and not change it, but be open to a hotel there. We've got convenient freeway access at Mequon Road and now to the south along Port Washington. So there's if you had a hotel, a higher end hotel that was accessible via those on-ramps and off-ramps, the market might respond favorably. And then the last piece was that Jack described the shift of that retail convenience commercial node from Donges Bay. It really, the driving and the traffic isn't conducive to having more traffic there. The roads are rather narrow, especially on the east-west on Donges Bay, and it's already a little congested and hard to get in and out of some of those businesses. So the Economic Development Board thought it would be better to move it farther to the south, closer to the freeway on-ramp, where if there's people coming for convenience-type things, they can get on quick, get off quick, and not be on the residential streets or some of the rest of that thoroughfare as long. So that, just wanted to give you the backdrop to that discussion. So I think we ought to take these one at a time, Jack. You rattled off a bunch of things we want some input on. First is the zoning, and maybe along with it the potential for creating a few nonconformities along the way.
Yeah, if we want to just look at the Economic Development Board version on the screen or on your desk, if there's any objections to anything that we've done so far, I think would be nice to hear. I mean, when you talk about industrial, right now the B4 does allow for a lot of industrial users. Again, the market just didn't work that way here. Most of the stuff we have in Corporate Parkway is mostly office. We do have some smaller ones. The ones that we end up having some issues that are somewhat industrial are like the data center on Port Rhoda. We've gotten complaints from noise because that's some of the things that industrial users will bring is some, generators or other big equipment that makes noise. So, if we were going to do anything, we would probably focus it this area here, but we wouldn't just allow it just specific light industrial. We would probably limit it to certain types of uses. So that's one aspect. And then the other one, I think the big one is the multifamily. Is there any appetite for doing additional multifamily? There's some vacant land on the southwest portion that abuts residential. In a lot of communities, they use multifamily as a buffer between single family and the commercial zones. So is that an area we could look at in terms of some multifamily. The other part of multifamily is tough because I've heard from other business owners, especially like if you look at, I won't specify it like which ones, but like in this area here on East Town Square, some of these users have contacted me in the past, say they're just not able to get good rents out of there because there are a lot of two-story walk-ups and there's just not a lot of Class A office there. And they've wanted to convert. Now, I just basically told them I don't think we'd do this piecemeal. It'd have to be a bigger effort. But the problem with this is all like one big condominium. So it'd be tough to kind of do that without getting a lot more buy-in from a lot of the different owners there. And some of them are still functioning and doing well, but some are struggling a little bit. And then there's others examples of this as you go further south, down in this area, down past the funeral home. There's a couple other ones down here. And again, those are typically like condominium developments that you'd have to get buy-in from multiple parties in order to do that. But there are other options. Like I said, this is the day property, as we call it. This is a vacant piece here that's been sitting vacant for quite some time. That would maybe not be a bad multifamily area. And there's other infill sites, I think, along the corridor that could be looked at. But again, we wanted to get the appetite of council to see if you're open to that before we even include that in any land use or zoning categories. So I guess those two things, and then this issue of doing a market analysis, I think would be the three top questions, and we can answer anything else if you have. Is there anything else did I miss?
Market analysis, some gauge of temperature on the less dense multifamily.
Industrial
zoning,
and non-conforming.
yeah,
So those four
non-conforming
items.
issues. Why don't we do with the zoning overall and with it some of the potential non-conformances? That's a nice one we can break off.
I actually have a question about that, the non-conforming use.
Sure.
It did, the way you described it, it is not an incredible hardship for the business owner if their business is now currently non-conforming from a standpoint of their inability to expand their business, even though it's non-conforming. Is there any issue with them then selling the property to another entity? Does it, because it's non-conforming, can it remain as is, or does it have to be at that point?
Sure, it can remain as is. In fact, one of the examples in town center here is the auto body shop that is on Cedarburg Road. That was bought by a new party, and they did a remodeling and they did an expansion. So they came through planning commissions we call it an exempted use, which is an expansion of a non-conforming use. So they were allowed to expand. They were allowed to sell it. New owner came in, did a nice job on it. Looks good. We try to get them to clean it up as much as possible. But I think from that aspect, I think everything is okay. Even the state statutes now have been changed over the years, and Brian can address this, is that they're protected a little bit more when they get damaged by fire or other types of, storms, that they're protected somewhat there. And then like I said, our code protects them from being able to be expanded. The biggest issue again is and we've seen this before too, is where they sit for over a year, then they lose their grandfatherness at that point. So then they'd have to switch. But that doesn't happen.
That's an unusual circumstance,
Yeah.
I would think. From what you're describing, I don't think it would be much of a hardship in a viable business that
I think,
is
when that happens, it
non-conforming.
usually means the market is saying it's probably not a good location for that use anymore.
If it's vacant for a year. And
So
no one
in that
wants to keep
sense, I'm
doing
not
it.
adverse to it because I see the challenges here trying to clump anything or coordinate some sort of system for these for this section. And on that same note, I'm in favor. I usually don't love getting consultant for every little thing, but I find this particular zone really challenging in terms of, and I think it will help to when we do our upgrades to try to get the lighting and the medians and sort of make it cohesive. But it does not look cohesive now, and if we don't do something to kind of make these clusters of businesses, I think it will be always very disparate looking and not as vibrant as it might be as a corridor. So in that sense, I'm in favor of getting the market analysis. I'm kind of lukewarm on the hotel idea. I don't know. We have 2 hotels there, showing their age and almost, from a different era. One of them. And I don't know how that would affect our existing businesses and et cetera. So I'm a little bit more neutral on that, but positive on the market analysis, positive on the rezoning.
Well, the market analysis would just assess the viability of a hotel. can always choose to do it or not do it. But it's just to get a little more info on if it even makes sense. Well, there's one opinion on the market analysis and let's try and constrain this to one topic at a time. So the rezoning and, not the rezoning, just the clustering in general and some of the nonconformances. Let's stick to that, and we'll line them up and knock them down one at a time. Any other comments from anyone else on the committee? Go ahead, Alderman Meyer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the same reaction the board had as well. They concurred with that.
Yeah, specifically the softness of the office space and some of the retail. It's just getting a little harder for retail to make it. And we're probably a little more successful than most, but we've got on average a higher end, more boutique or niche kind of retail. So we've been lucky to be able to keep it going, but there's certainly a continued trend towards retail not being able to make it as easy. The Amazons of the world are simply too good at what they do for most items. Alderman Bach.
Yeah, so I support that marketing analysis as well, and hopefully some good things will come out of that on what could go in there. I mean, things like banks, I mean, I would bet in 10 or 15 years some of those bank buildings, those standalone bank buildings, they might not even be banks anymore since everybody does so much online banking and things, so that might be interesting to find out from that marketing study as well. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it'd be nice to hear what they think about hotels. I mean, I'll go on record and saying I'm personally against hotels on Port Washington Road unless it is a kind of a boutique hotel. None of these kind of national chain box hotels. Just because, I mean, I'm just going to make a editorial here, just because maybe I can or can't. But so I bring in a bunch of national speakers for a not-for-profit on the North Shore, and it's hard to find good hotels. So I either have to put up those people. They either want to be in Cedarburg, downtown Cedarburg, at one of the small hotels, or they want to be at one of the downtown hotels. We've had bad reactions from some of the people who have stayed at the ones in Mequon. We've had bad reactions for the ones that stayed in Glendale along Port Washington Road, and also on the one on Brown Deer Road and whatever that one is, just on the west part of Brown Deer Road. So I think you could have a nice hotel. I could be persuaded on a nice boutique hotel. I mean, doesn't matter to me what the marketing study would say, but a kind of a cheap box hotel on Port Washington Road, when we have plenty of those in Grafton and other places, I just would be strongly against that. So it'd have to be a pretty nice hotel. I probably said more than I should, but anyway.
It's on the agenda, so you can talk about it. Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick thank you also to the Economic Development Board and staff. I know you've been working on this for 2 years, so to get to this point is good. I think you're nearing the end. Trying to focus on zoning. First of all, I guess I'm not necessarily in favor of a study. To me, it's another study. We already know about the softening office and retail markets. I do kind of align a little bit with Alderman Meyer about kind of let the market speak for what we want in certain areas, because I don't know that we will get consensus, especially like I would have been maybe the opposite of Alderman Bach. Like I'd really like a new hotel. And a year ago, the Economic Development Board decided not to pursue that study. So it sounds like that recommendation may have changed, and then coupled with the desire to have not pass the buck, but have a third-party consultant give us a third chart of this that we're going to be comparing and ultimately probably coming to similar conclusions that do we want to create more non-conforming uses or not. And I'm thinking about the industrial park off of Buntrock, where there were a lot of industrial businesses that when they wanted to sell, it was not like any use could just go in there. And so a lot of those would sit vacant or eventually torn down until, basically they waited until a multifamily developer came, and that was supplemented with TIF money. So I guess I would say that if we are okay with, TIF money being used to facilitate the current property owners, well, the buyer will use the TIF, but I'm saying that they should be eligible for it because there's going to be a big gap in value associated with the sale. So that would create a lot of hardship, like it started to do with the Buntrock industrial property owners. But thankfully, they got their price because it was in a TIF, is my point. Whereas if it's not eligible here, that could be more challenging. So I guess I don't know that I would do the zoning study. I think it's just going to be another 6 months of waiting, and I think I'd like to get this near the finish line after you guys have been working on it 2 weeks. We're sitting on the TIF package. We haven't talked about design standards. There's several elements to this package, so to just add another layer to it, we're just never going to get there.
I don't think the intent was to wait for the market analysis to finish this. That would dictate potential future action to change some of the office or maybe nibble away at the edges of the retail. I don't think we're going to wait for all that to happen.
Yeah, I think it could
before
be done
executing.
concurrently. I think the issue with the market analysis is that, I think from the board's perspective, this is a 20 to 30 year vision here of what we're going to see. And then of course, 10 years things could change and something else could come along. But we didn't want to rush through this and just create permitted and conditional uses that we just are not marketable. So they wanted to go out there and have a firm that's an expert in this area tell us that yes and no, these will be uses that will be attractive here or not. And then from a zoning perspective, we can look at those and say, do we want those or not? But I think the board felt that having a third party look at them would be beneficial just to see that we're on the right page with the types of uses we're allowing, so that we don't create a zoning code that then nobody wants to build anything in because there's the uses that the market just doesn't want to react to.
I guess it was not. I had a different take on that discussion a little bit at EDB. I think we want to advance this with EDB's recommendations on the map and get that going while we get a market analysis going to see if there's any small change right at the end or even a separate action after we codify this. Those are the market analysis is longer range planning, for 5-10 years from now when office gets even worse and retail gets even worse.
Well, I'm just saying from our perspective, I think Alderman Meyer hit it on the head when he said this is a very complex area. We're only at a high level of our zoning changes right now. The rest of this is going to take time. It's going to take a while. So I don't think a market analysis is going to hold us up because we're going to be trying to flush out things already. And then hopefully when the analysis would be done, it would confirm or maybe reject some of our opinions, but we'll still be at a point where we'll be a lot further along in the process. But to go through these, now it becomes a hard part, is to go through the individual types of uses and any other design standards we want to create and any other changes we want to make. That's going to take some time. So I don't think the market analysis necessarily will hold us up.
Just to also give you the feedback on like multifamily, I agree with the board's recommendation, no dense structures, but if it's going to be 2 or 4 family spread out in this corridor, I'm not opposed to it. I don't think TIF should be used for, I would add that to the list of excluded eligibility for TIF funds. I don't want to use TIF to do apartments. Also, I was interested, I guess I'm aware of some certain developments that people are considering at the various corners of our town, city, and I worry that, maybe it's a bank, maybe it's another gas station or car wash. So are you looking at the corners appropriately here, or what will those uses be at the corners?
When you say corners, which are specifically referring to?
Dundas Bay Import and Mequon Import?
Dundas Bay Import would be a retail service. Mequon Import would be the retail service with an overlay that would allow the gas stations and fast foods. So those would be basically what you see at Mequon Import in that area now would be pretty similar to what the zoning is there now with the B2 zoning. The Dundas Bay Import, they felt that because there's only a few parcels there, and we already have an applicant going through Planning Commission on the old Ferrante site, that there really isn't much left, and then we have a new restaurant owner on the Solomon site. There really isn't much left in this node to get redeveloped, so they felt that we would move the overlay site basically to the end of the community now that we have a full interchange in the south. So these 4 parcels would be included in the overlay. So they were wanting to see it more intense uses down in this area than they would at the intersection.
So Dundas Bay Import car washes, gas station?
Would not be allowed.
Okay.
So
That's
that's where
good.
on the map,
Yep.
you would see that
No, the thought was to cluster the more intense type uses towards where there's better freeway access.
so when you look at the map here, you have basically this is the auto service facility is the Goodyear, and then this auto service facility is the Clark. Those would become non-conforming uses.
Okay. And then I also agree that no more industrial on the corridor. But again, good job to the board, and thanks to Alderman Gephardt for jumping into all this.
Alderman Hancher.
Yeah, I would be in favor of having a study done. I think that's a wise thing to do, just so that the experts can take a look at it and see what their vision is. I'm in favor of having a hotel. The size of Mequon, and we don't really have a upscale hotel. You have, all other communities have a upscale hotel, and we don't have one. I mean, it's kind of, and I think it would bring places that I've known that have had upscale hotels is bring a lot of people to the area that would create economic development. But I think I think having an upscale hotel in that area would be helpful to the surrounding businesses. But
Alderman Meyer.
Well, that's where I was saying earlier that we would not include it in the zoning code. We would put it in a land use plan, so give guidance to developers that we want a hotel in certain locations, but then we still have the ability to then make them seek a text amendment, basically rezoning it, and probably a PUD, and then we can dictate all the terms we want in terms of the types of hotel we're looking for. Right now it's a conditional use basically in the B2. So if anybody came forward in the B2 zoning and wanted a hotel, we'd probably be limited in what we could or could not enforce on them. So I think that was the plan we suggested to EDB was, let's put it in a land use plan just to give guidance, but then that kind of commits you saying, okay, we're interested, but then we got to work out the details later.
And the other thing to bring up is just the residential aspect of it. I'm not in favor of needless to say, any favor of large apartment complexes inside there. I think, and we'll be talking about the surveys next month possibly, but that's one of the main things that were in the surveys beforehand, that residents didn't want to have a lot of that. We did do a lot of that anyways inside of the town center areas. We got quite a bit that we push forward inside there. So large-scale apartment complexes would not be something I'd be favorable for, but we do have a lot of successful and very nice condos that are across, like we have some that are right across from the movie theater, places like that are very nice. I could see some of that type of stuff if that could be fitting in. You know, condos inside of those area. You know, those across from the movie theater, I think those are side-by-side condos. Those are, like I said before, very nice inside there. I could see the use of that a little bit more inside of that area if that could fit in inside there, but to go with massive apartment complexes, and that's what just the developers want to build. I mean, they don't want to build a one-story apartment complex or a two-story that isn't beneficial for them, you know. So they want to go full bore on everything, and that's something that I just really wouldn't see about in that area.
Yeah, no one in Economic Development Board wanted that either. Just the lower scale, you know, condos or maybe fourplexes.
Yeah, unfortunately, whenever
nothing
you open
bigger
up
than that.
apartments, that's what you normally get from the developers, you know, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, from them trying to propose that stuff, but that's what you normally get.
Yeah, but if we were to entertain it, we'd propose it more like we discussed, not the thing you're afraid of. That's no one wants to replicate Town Center on the east side. That's Town Center's for Town Center, and Town Center's not for everywhere else. Any other, Alderman Gephardt?
I just wanted to weigh in and represent a couple of other conversations that were had at the committee level. One of those I think that's really important to point out is the group as a whole felt like there was a new opportunity that's been presented on the south side, given the change in the on and off ramps there at Port Washington Road, that would become more of a focal point for those that are coming from the south that might be coming into our community. And that is one of the reasons why, as the mayor and Jack pointed out, looking at that a little bit differently to the south end of Port Washington Road as it goes back over the highway, okay? The other thing that was a bit of a challenge for the group, and certainly one for me as well, is just, you know, looking at this area as a whole. It's a big corridor when you take a look at it from the south side all the way up to the north end. And, you know, there was a lot of discussion around what we don't want, or maybe what people, you know, their opinions were on what was right or what was wrong. But what was very challenging for the group is to try to figure out what would be allowed, right? You start taking out retail, you start taking out office in a corridor that's this big, where does that leave you? And so I think that's where the challenge was, is we think about residential and coming back to that discussion point, not to create more traffic or more density, but to try to do it in a more thoughtful way. And there are examples, as Alderman Meyer mentioned, along that corridor that I think are good examples that could be duplicated in other areas along that stretch, and might add some value to some of the property that's there and some of the retail that is in that area. So I just wanted to point that out. I am in support in doing a market study. Again, from where I stand, I'm at a little bit of a loss on how we fill some of that valuable space and do it thoughtfully. Maybe there's some new ideas that could come from there. I am in favor of looking at doing some more thoughtful multifamily, provided again that it was in line with what's already been discussed.
Not on my mic's not on now. Awesome. And a willingness to maybe have that market analysis look at a hotel or some reduced density, either condos, single-family homes, or some less dense multifamily as a potential solution for the softening office and retail market. Does that generally capture the flavor of the discussion? Well, maybe we can do a straw poll on that. Does that capture everything?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed there was consensus. The only one there was a little bit of debate was the hotel issue. It seemed like there's somewhere against, somewhere in favor, but everything else seemed to be pretty
I think
good
even the
consensus.
naysayers said if it was higher end, they might be
Yeah.
on board.
Okay.
The problem that I was always told is with some of those hotels is that in order to build them, they have to have the density to make a profit. And so, for somebody to put in a high-end boutique hotel, I've always been told that is a challenge because you don't get enough rooms, and the developer's not going to build it because they're not going to make enough money. So, that's that's more than you guys know more about than I do. But so, if it was a nice upscale boutique hotel, I think I could be persuaded. But I just don't know how that all works.
Alderman Tolaco.
I guess I'll chime in since I haven't said anything. I'm more in line with what Alderman Meyer said. I think it's going to be hard to try and do complete zoning in this area just because of everything that's available there. And then with anything, my concern always is congestion and traffic. And Port Washington Road is very busy and has a lot of action already. So I would just factor that in. And then the other point is it's the entranceway to Mequon, so having that study and seeing what the market would say for it, I think would be a really good starting point to get a better grasp of what should go there and what's going to work for our community.
Thank you. Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. Said two more wrap-up items. I'd previously discussed with staff, we have a We Energies substation it's in my district along Port Road. They know where it is. And my thought was some kind of discussion with We Energies about a pocket park there, or if they're not willing to kind of engage the public with all the land right there, at least do more screening and landscaping, because there's a huge substation right there. A lot of people don't miss it, but once you actually notice it, it's right there, and it's right outside of Winding Hollow, and it's like the first thing they see every day. So let's make it nice or screen it better, I guess would be my request. The other item was I recently watched the Planning Commission meeting when there was a salon spa type business that was proposed at the corner of Donjas Bay and Port. And it was a neat building, but ultimately the design concept is really what came out of it, and that the developer proposed a modern, very square looking, modern looking building. It was nice looking, but it was at the corner. This is where Ferrante's is, and I believe that was tabled so that they can go back and redesign it. And there probably is, we send mixed messages to developers about what we really want. Mayor, you had good comments about it's really just the massing at the corners, and it's a little more depth. It's not like we're necessarily looking for Victorian type design on everything, but am I mistaken that we were going to do some kind of design standards for this? And I guess how do you plan to address the architectural component of the corridor?
The Port Washington Road Design Committee is still available to work on the design guidelines, but we really need to narrow down on the types of uses within the zoning districts before we're going to be able to establish some clear design guidelines. I don't think it'll be anything like what you saw for the Uleo Creek design guideline standards, because there we're dealing with mostly greenfield development. We have done smaller versions of design guidelines for like the B6 and B7 industrial districts, as well as there was one other one that we did. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think that is to come. That is part of the package as part of this, but it probably wouldn't be a good use of our time to do that in advance of the zoning decisions, at least to some degree.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think in general, it feels like whether it's a bank or a fast food, people are hoping to avoid those box-looking structures. So I sympathize with the developer when they spend all this money on a design and they come in and it's nowhere close to what we're looking for. And that's what I observed in that meeting. But
we met with the developer and the applicants and discussed it with them several times. They were not willing to make any changes without their opportunity to speak with the Planning Commission first.
got it. Thank you.
Yeah, ran into a bit of a roadblock there. Staff tried. But I agree, a guide that's published could help in advance, because at least there's, before they even conceive of working up a plan and discussing it, there's at least something published. But one thing at a time. So we have a number of items to get through. So maybe just a straw poll by show of hands. General support for the EDB version of the map and the concepts therein. If you're on board, hand up. If not, hand down. That looked like a majority. Next was a market analysis to look at what to do with some of those areas of retail and office that might go soft in the future. Again, a show of hands if there's support for a market analysis. Okay, generally favorable. What else do we need firm direction on? The market analysis will include some of the other.
I mean, we can, the idea of multifamily of some sort, some, not town center multifamily density, but some level of multifamily.
Yeah, some low, moderate multifamily, or even some single family. Yeah. Show of hands generally. If it's the right kind of, not overly dense. To Alderman Talako's point, we don't want 400 new dwelling units on the east side making Port Washington Road a living hell to drive up and down every day. So as long as it's the right kind of residential units, general support for that. Maybe if the market analysis says we are going to encounter a problem in the near future with our softening retail and office spaces. Was there anything else?
Nope.
I think that covers it. Well, the hotel will also be in the market study, I think, to see if there's economic viability of a higher end hotel. I agree, a higher end, not a, we don't need a 129 a night, low end hotel, but something nicer. I mean, that's one thing I hear consistently from people visiting the areas. They like to be able to stay in a nicer hotel while they're in Mequon, so they can stay within Mequon while they're visiting Mequon. So, okay, I think we've got through that then. That was a preliminary discussion. We'll see, of course, all this will come back for a final approval after staff. I just wanted to get some general direction so they don't go off in the complete wrong direction.
Sure. So the next item, we just want to give, this was more an update than anything. This is about the streetscape plan that you guys saw back in March. We haven't forgot about it. We decided, we spoke with the mayor and administration, we decided that we would push construction off for this until 2025 with all the work being done on the Port Washington Road area and along our town center area. We felt adding another layer of construction may not be the most suitable at this point, and I'm sure you're getting calls, we're getting calls from constituents about traffic, so we felt that we could push that off another year. So we're still working on some of the recommendations that council came forward. The OIT project has kind of consumed a lot of our time throughout the summer, but now that it's kind of wrapping up for this session anyway, I'm sure there'll be still some work to do in spring, but I think we have time over the winter to kind of follow up with the Port Washington Road design guidelines or design concepts, and then we'll have something ready back to you within the next few months, and then with bidding and then construction to occur in 2025. So that's just more of an update than anything, just to let you know we haven't forgot about that. I don't know if you have any questions about that or not, or we're not really looking for feedback on that.
Yeah, that was, you can blame me for pushing it a year, but with the Mequon Road interchange going out next year and a lot of traffic being diverted down Port Washington Road, it probably wasn't the time to tear up Port Washington Road. And that's just the way it's going to have to be, I think, to accommodate that project without creating even more headaches for people. It'll be interesting enough with Mequon Road interchange being gone for a better part of a year. So, but that gives us some time to catch up with things and get that done, and we'll get it ready next fall for bidding. And
yeah, we have a schedule in.
Put it in 2025.
Yeah, complete bid documents April 24. Bid project for construction in fall of 2024.
And then, do we want to talk quickly about the TIF incentives? I think we talked about that this morning, that go along with some of these components.
Sure, that's the third prong of the Port Washington Road. I know some of the council members are probably new since we started this discussion, so if there's any discussion you want to have about how the TIF incentive policy has been working for the last few years, just let us know. We can set up a meeting one-on-one or something like that with Kim or I, so if you're interested, let me know. But, so basically, the last time we had this for the council, there was general support for the incentive policy. The one thing that there was a concern about was we had an extra incentive for high-priority uses in high-priority areas. And so this map I have, this is the high-priority sites that were determined by the Economic Development Board, so we have the gateways sections again. We did not, at the time, have a list of priority uses that would be eligible for this extra incentive. I guess just to back up, so any developer incentive now in the TIFs fall under our fast track formula, and I put that in the packet for you, an example of a tier 1 and a tier 2. So every parcel in the city or in the TIF would get a tier 1 incentive if they meet the criteria. Tier 2 would apply to parcels that combine 2 parcels together into one development project or are a high priority or part of a high priority site with a high priority use. At the time, we did not have a definition for high priority uses. We worked with the Economic Development Board a little bit. What we came up with was basically a list of ineligible uses, which is in your packet. So we thought it'd be easier to exclude what uses would be not eligible for a TIF tier 2 incentive, and so that there's a list in the packet. It includes fast food restaurants, gas stations, financial and insurance institutions, auto dealerships, things like light industrial. So we're just looking for feedback if there's anything you want to add to that list or take off that list. If not, we would incorporate that into the policy, and we'd bring the final policy back to the council for adoption through resolution at a later date. Just to make sure we're all understanding, this is only for the tier 2 incentive. The tier 1 incentive, the way the fast track formula was designed was that anybody would be eligible for it as long as you met the criteria, which is you had to have a new building value in excess of 1.5 million of what the existing assessed improvement value. So, we're just looking for some feedback on that list. If there's one to include some, take some off, or leave it the way it is.
So those are on page 10 of your packet.
Yes, page 10.
Alderman Parrish.
So again, multifamily.
Yeah, that's the one thing.
Yep.
When you said that, I can add. So we can just add straight out all residential.
Yep. Well, yeah, resident. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
That's good.
So if that's something the group
Yep.
agrees on, we can do that. That's not a problem.
And I debated building size. I get that we have $1.5 million threshold, but are we really getting what we want? That's just a bank or a fast food restaurant. So
Yeah,
it's,
the
it's tempting to say, oh, if you want to use TIF, it should be like 5,000 square feet building. But I don't know.
Yeah, we did this. We created this fast track formula years ago, and then the history behind it was we did not want to create winners and losers at the time, and maybe that wasn't the right strategy, but that was what the council dictated at the time. So we worked with our former mayor, and we came up with this formula that if you meet the formula, you get it, and I think that's where some of the concern was. We put the 1.5 in there just because we wanted a substantial increase in value from what was there now. So square footage didn't always mean you were going to get a higher value, so that's why we did it that way. So we can look at a different option, but I think that's, we're kind of on a different plane than that right now.
That was 3 mayors ago.
Yeah, yes.
It's been out there for a decade and some change.
Yeah.
I think it was approved the meeting before I was sworn in as alderman first. So it's been a while. Was there a? So I heard a suggestion to add residential in general to the list of not enhanced TIF incentive. Show of hands, everyone who supports that amendment. Ineligible for the enhanced amendment, or enhanced incentive. Sorry. All right. More direction.
All right.
And then the thought was we had kind of discussed this before, but 3 of us weren't there. I don't think that when we get the rezoning component done, these would be effective at the same time. We would bring them together.
Well, it's, I mean, if we're,
Or,
cons-
I guess it's different now because we're
yeah, we're doing ineligible uses, so we can,
ineligible,
we
so
can bring
just
this
do this
back.
now.
Yeah, we can bring this back. We don't need to worry about the zoning for this part, because a lot of these, some of these uses, probably with the zoning would take care of on its own, but we put them in there anyway, just in case someone came forward for a zoning change and the council decided, okay, we'll accept that zoning change. We still wanted to make them ineligible, but yeah, I think the way we switched it now, I think we can adopt this without waiting on the zoning.
I think I agree the more I've talked about it here. We've waited a while for this. For those that haven't been around for a while, TIFs 4 and 5 have been out there a long, long time. They haven't gotten used to the extent we had envisioned. They're also fundamentally different than TIF 3 for Town Center. We didn't borrow any money for this one. This is all a pay-as-you-go formula, so they get a tax credits in the future for the value they create up front, so there's none of our money involved, so it's a little, takes all the risk off of us. They have to perform or they don't get the incentive that they thought they were going to. So I would be in favor of bringing this forward sooner rather than later, with the hopes of spurring some sort of use of it, because I think only a handful of properties, 3 or 4.
We've had 3, I believe, or 4, and then one of them has been already paid back. So we have 3 open ones.
Yeah, so certainly not broad usage of that plan that's been around for more than 10 years.
Yeah.
Any feelings on that? I don't see anyone objecting, so let's get that back for us. We can make a formal decision sooner rather than later.
Okay.
We are out of time for this meeting. Maybe if we're done with the Port Washington Road corridor things, anyone else have any parting comments? Good discussion. We used all the time for committee of the whole. I would suggest that maybe we table the next item and we can take it up in the future, and we can jump over to the water and sewer items. So motion to table the management partners our analysis and action plan.
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll table that for a future time. Well, we skip the info items and look for a motion to adjourn. Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. How about a brief 3 or 4 minute break? I got to get some water, and we'll reconvene.
it's the second way, but yes, yes, absolutely.
All right, we're going to get the Mequon Municipal Water Utility Commission meeting rolling. Let's call the meeting to order and call the roll. Yeah, absent.
Commissioner Telacco? Commissioner Meyer? Commissioner Hancher?
Here.
Commissioner Bach?
Here.
Commissioner Parrish?
Here.
Commissioner Schneider?
Here.
Commissioner Gebhardt?
Here.
Commissioner Nervin?
Here. First up is approval of the meeting minutes from September 12th. Motion and a second. Any comments or corrections? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved. Next, discussion item, authorizing of a water utility leak audit by Astera in the amount of not to exceed of $37,500. And
Second.
motion and a second. Any questions from our water utility representative, Mr. Voigt? Commissioner Parrish, sorry.
Yeah, I was so thrilled you guys jumped on this and brought it back right away, so good start. Can you please confirm that this includes Bayside, River Hills, and Thiensville for the survey area and all the water lines to it?
Yep, there's a 140, what is it, square miles, I think?
It includes all 140 miles roughly of main and laterals in the system. The area that we provided them did include all of the Mequon water utilities, so that's Bayside, Thiensville, and Mequon. Does not include River Hills at this time, but that's because we have no active infrastructure in the River Hills portion right now.
Okay, and this is just, we're looking for leaks. This doesn't help with the theft component of it at all.
Yep,
This is just
correct.
starting off with leaks.
Yep, this
Got
is non-revenue water, correct?
Okay, thanks again.
Mhm.
Yeah, it includes all 140
Any other questions from
miles
any of the other
roughly
commissioners?
main.
We have a motion and a second. If there are no other comments or questions, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any? Well, do we need to do a roll call vote? This doesn't come before council. Oh, you're right. So, yeah, we'll do a roll call vote. Sorry.
Commissioner Telacco? Commissioner Meyer? Commissioner Hancher?
Aye.
Commissioner Bach?
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish?
Aye.
Commissioner Schneider?
Aye.
Commissioner Gebhardt?
Aye.
Commissioner Nervin?
Aye. That item is approved. Next is the adoption of the updated Mequon Water Utility Master Plan, which we got a sneak peek at, I believe, last month, but it's here for final action. Does anyone have any questions, or we want Jim from the utility to give us an overview?
Or actually, I will if you
Or Kristen?
don't mind. Yes, we noted the minor changes that we otherwise updated on the draft report, and then we just wanted to also provide in very preliminary draft form how the master plan will then flow through to the documents that we use moving forward. And that includes what you see as what you will see as the exhibits to the budget. So that will address the capital components of the recommendations from the master plan, the implementation plan, which are the